December 10, 1944. The Ardennes Forest stretched endless and silent under a brittle gray sky. Snow clung to the skeletal trees, crunching under the boots of patrolling American scouts. You can almost feel the freezing wind biting through wool coats, the cold so sharp it stings exposed skin. Up in the command tent, General George S. Patton hunched over maps spread across a wooden table, the yellow glow of a single lantern flickering against his face. He traced the lines of German divisions with a steel pencil, eyes narrowing. Intelligence reports, intercepted radio chatter, and prisoner interrogations painted one grim picture. The Wehrmacht was planning a winter offensive, and the Ardennes, deemed impassable in snow, was their weak point. "They'll try to punch through here," Patton muttered, tapping on the map. "And when they do, we need to be ready." Patton's staff scribbled notes, some exchanging uneasy glances. Months earlier, he had predicted the very scenario now forming: Hitler's gamble to split the Allied lines, crush the Americans, and force a negotiated end. He didn't just see it. He acted, ordering stockpiles of fuel and ammunition moved closer to the front, repositioning mechanized units, and briefing key commanders on the vulnerabilities ahead. But outside his tent, SHAEF headquarters was different. Eisenhower's aides dismissed the warnings as paranoid overreach. Generals, wrapped in layers of confident planning and logistics, nodded politely and returned to their routines, their eyes glazed over with the fatigue of endless campaigns. Patton's voice, sharp and commanding, seemed almost alone against the calm indifference of command bureaucracy. By dusk, snow began to fall harder, a thick curtain masking the distant hum of armored movement. Patton stepped outside, boots crunching in rhythm with the wind, surveying the frozen roads. Sherman tanks sat ready, crews bracing for what could come. He didn't wait for approval. He couldn't. The Ardennes were about to wake, and he intended to meet it head-on. And somewhere to the north, unseen, the rumble of German panzers stirred beneath the white landscape. The first shockwave was coming, December 16, 1944. Before dawn, a deep, unnatural quiet blanketed the Ardennes. Then it shattered. From the east, the earth trembled under the tracks of Tiger and Panther tanks, engines growling like predators in the snow. Artillery fire erupted across frozen villages, sending splinters of wood and shards of roof tiles into the wind. You can almost feel the ground shake beneath your feet, the acrid scent of burning fuel and cordite hanging in the icy air. All around, inexperienced American units scrambled. Communications lines were cut, radios crackled with panic, and officers shouted orders over the chaos. Many commanders had ignored the warnings. They were caught flat-footed, a forest of snow and steel suddenly alive with the roar of the German offensive. But Patton's Third Army, they moved differently. Supply depots already stocked with fuel and shells meant Sherman tanks could roll without delay. Infantry units had been positioned within striking distance, their trenches dug deep, snow mounted for cover. Reconnaissance teams had mapped every icy turn, every choke point along the roads. Patton himself, cigar clenched between his teeth, oversaw movements with an intensity that made the chaos outside seem almost irrelevant. As reports flooded in, villages overrun, columns pinned, the contrast was stark. Generals who had dismissed his warnings now raced to coordinate defenses, their calm shattered. Patton, anticipating this moment, didn't panic. Instead, he issued orders that seemed almost reckless in their speed. "We hit them before they consolidate. Move the 4th Armored, flank north, no delay." Snow fell harder, shells whined overhead. And yet, through the storm, Patton's plan began to unfold like clockwork. Sherman tanks tore through forest paths where German units assumed impassable conditions would protect them. Infantry, ready and supplied, dug into defensive positions that would buy hours that meant the difference between containment and disaster. By nightfall, German officers reported unexpected resistance. Their calculations had failed to account for one man's foresight, one army's preparation. Patton had turned the tables before the first full day had ended. But even as the Americans held, a shadow loomed. Hitler's armored spearheads were still advancing, faster than anyone had imagined. Could Patton's gamble hold under the crushing pressure? December 17, 1944. Dawn broke over the Ardennes with a pale, ghostly light reflecting off ice-coated trees. The battlefield was a frozen graveyard of abandoned trucks, smoldering tanks, and shattered buildings. You can almost hear the distant moans of wounded soldiers carried by the wind, the whistle of artillery like a haunting dirge. Patton moved through the chaos like a man possessed. Maps tucked under his arm, binoculars around his neck, he seemed to see the battlefield in 3 dimensions, every road, every ridge, every potential trap. Orders were issued with a razor-sharp precision. Units would strike at the German flanks, artillery would rain down on supply columns, and armored divisions would push relentlessly to relieve encircled towns. The Third Army surged forward. Sherman tanks, their tracks cutting through icy mud, roared along pre-cleared routes. Infantry followed, moving like clockwork, supported by engineers who laid makeshift bridges over frozen rivers. German units, expecting an easy advance, were caught off guard. Commanders shouted, signals flared, and chaos spread among their ranks. Patton's foresight, months of planning, preposition fuel, supply dumps, and forward reconnaissance, paid off in real time. He had predicted the German timetable almost exactly, and now for the first time it felt as if the Ardennes itself bent to his will. Small towns like St. Vith and Bastogne that might have fallen quickly were bolstered by his rapid response. Reinforcements arrived before panic could set in, and U.S. artillery ripped into the advancing panzers with devastating accuracy. But the winter was unforgiving. Snowstorms slowed even the best-trained units, frostbite claimed soldiers as silently as bullets, and German resistance remained fierce. Patton, undeterred, pushed harder. "We keep moving, no hesitation," he barked to his officers. His gaze scanned the horizon, searching for the next weak point, the next opportunity. Somewhere in the German lines, officers whispered in disbelief. How is this possible? They were supposed to be unprepared, yet here they are, striking back already. Patton had done what few could. He turned the tables before the enemy had fully struck. But even as his tanks carved a path through the snow, a new threat emerged, an armored division moving faster than intelligence had predicted. The counterattack would soon be tested beyond anything Patton had faced before. Could the Third Army maintain its momentum against the full fury of Hitler's gamble? December 18, 1944. Bastogne, a small Belgian town, sat encircled by German forces, its streets clogged with refugees and burning vehicles. Snow whipped through shattered windows, and the scent of smoke mixed with frozen earth. You can almost hear the terrified whispers of the 101st Airborne soldiers, their numbers too few, their supplies dangerously low, trapped in what seemed like a death trap. Patton's mind was already racing. From his forward command post, he studied the map, tracing the most direct but also most treacherous routes to the town. Every mile was a gamble, narrow roads buried in snow, forests concealing enemy patrols, bridges weakened by frost. Yet he knew time was the enemy's deadliest weapon. The longer Bastogne held, the higher the casualties. Delay meant annihilation. "Fourth Armored North Flank, move now," he ordered, voice cutting through static-laced radio lines. "No excuses, we relieve them by nightfall." Sherman tanks roared to life, their engines spitting exhaust into the frozen dawn. Mechanized infantry moved in formation, tracking along icy roads pre-scouted by Patton's reconnaissance teams. Soldiers clutched rifles, snow clinging to their helmets, adrenaline pushing back the bite of frost. Each passing hour was measured in lives, every delay a potential disaster. Meanwhile, German commanders, confident they had trapped Bastogne, were blindsided by the Third Army's speed. Artillery units were redeployed, flanks exposed. Reports poured in, Sherman tanks appearing where no one expected them, infantry cutting supply lines, the encirclement weakening before their eyes. The audacity of Patton's maneuver left them scrambling, uncertainty creeping into their once precise timetable. At Bastogne, the 101st could scarcely believe what they saw. From the walls of the town, snow-drenched soldiers spotted U.S. tanks bursting through the surrounding forest, guns blazing. Relief had arrived faster than anyone dared hope, not by luck but because Patton had foreseen this moment weeks earlier. His anticipation of German strategy, ignored by so many, was now the town's lifeline. Yet even as reinforcements reached the beleaguered defenders, a gnawing tension remained. German forces were regrouping, their armor still powerful, their intent lethal. Patton knew this was far from over. The Ardennes were not just frozen forests, they were a crucible, and the true test of foresight and resolve was still ahead. December 19, 1944. The Ardennes battlefield had transformed into a winter nightmare. Smoke rose from shattered villages, frozen rivers reflected the dull gray sky, and the relentless hum of artillery never ceased. You can almost taste the bitter cold mixed with the metallic tang of blood in the air. The German offensive, once confident, now began to falter under the weight of Patton's preemptive planning. From his command post, Patton scanned reports like a conductor leading an orchestra of chaos. Every unit, every tank, every infantry squad moved with purpose. He had anticipated the German timetable, and now his counterattack had synchronized perfectly. Flanking maneuvers cut off supply lines, artillery rained destruction on advancing columns, and mechanized infantry struck with precision. At a crossroads outside Bastogne, a column of panthers and tigers ground to a halt, surprised by a sudden barrage of 105 artillery. German officers barked orders, confusion spreading like wildfire. Patton's foresight had turned what could have been a rout into an opportunity. Each strike, each maneuver forced the enemy to react to him, not the other way around. He knew the stakes. One misstep could undo weeks of careful preparation. One frozen road, one missed supply delivery, and the Ardennes could collapse. Yet Patton's Third Army pressed on, a relentless wave of speed and discipline fueled by months of anticipation. Supply lines that others thought impossible to maintain in winter were flowing seamlessly. Every soldier knew the rhythm, every commander understood the stakes. Meanwhile, German morale began to crack. Orders from high command arrived late, conflicting, or too vague. Hitler's gamble had relied on shock and speed, both neutralized by a general who had seen the attack coming while others hesitated. The realization hit German officers like ice. They were no longer in control. Patton had taken the initiative, and the battlefield itself seemed to bend to his will. But victory was not yet secured. The Ardennes were vast, and German armored divisions still prowled the snowy forests, waiting for any opening. Patton's gamble had worked, but could he sustain it long enough to turn the tide completely? The winter storm, the enemy, and the clock were all against him. December 20th, 1944. The morning light revealed the full scale of the Ardennes battlefield: twisted wreckage of German tanks, icy roads lined with abandoned trucks, and soldiers, both Allied and Axis, moving cautiously through the snow. You can almost hear the groan of metal under frost, the shouts of officers over the biting wind, the distant rumble of artillery still echoing across frozen ridges. Patton's Third Army was relentless. Sherman tanks tore through forest paths that German commanders had assumed impassable, infantry advanced with precision, and artillery cut off every attempted retreat or regrouping. Months of preparation, foresight, and strategic audacity were now paying off in tangible, life-saving results. Bastogne remained secure, supply lines held, and the German advance had stalled. Inside the command post, Patton moved like a man possessed. He studied every incoming report, adjusting troop movements in real time. Each decision was a calculated strike against the enemy's assumptions. He had anticipated nearly every German maneuver, stockpiled supplies at critical locations, and ensured that every armored unit could respond instantly. It was a masterclass in foresight and initiative. Meanwhile, Allied commanders who had dismissed him weeks earlier could only watch in awe. Communications crackled with urgent requests for advice, for coordination, for insight into the speed and efficiency Patton had unleashed. The man who had been ignored was now the keystone of the Allied defense. By nightfall, German forces had begun a slow, forced retreat. Their panzers, once a symbol of unstoppable might, were immobilized or destroyed. Patton's gamble, moving faster, anticipating the enemy, supplying his army in impossible conditions, had turned the tide of the Ardennes offensive. Thousands of lives were saved, entire towns preserved, and the momentum of the battle shifted irrevocably in favor of the Allies. Yet even in victory, Patton's mind never rested. He knew this was only the beginning of winter's challenge. And the Ardennes had more tests ahead. But one undeniable truth remained: foresight, speed, and boldness had rewritten the rules of the battlefield. What others had ignored, he had acted upon, and history would never forget it. And